Let's now move on to illustration number 23. On 1st January 2021, RHT Limited subscribes to convertible preference shares of RDT Limited. All right. So again, RDT is basically the issuer and RHT is basically the holder of the instrument. The preference shares are convertible as under. If it is convertible in the ratio of 1 is to 1, if another strategic investor invests at an enterprise valuation of USD 100 million, all right? If some investor invests at an enterprise value at a valuation of 100 million, then the conversion ratio is going to be 1 is to 1. It is going to get converted in the ratio of 1.5 is to 1 if another strategic investor invests at a valuation of 150 million. It will be converted at 2 is to 1 if another strategic investor invests at a valuation of 200 million, and if there is no investment that is made within a period of 3 years, then it is convertible in the ratio of 3 is to 1. The question is, examine the nature of financial instrument. Now, over here also, the conversion ratio is contingent upon future events. If there is an investor who invests at a valuation of 100 million, then the conversion ratio will be 1 is to 1. If there is an investor who invests at a valuation of 150 million, then the conversion ratio will be 1.5 is to 1. And if an investor invests at a valuation of 200 million, then the conversion ratio will be 2 is to 1. And if none of the events happen in the next 3 years, the conversion ratio will actually be 3 is to 1. The question is this going to be an equity instrument or a financial liability? Now, again, since these are basically event contingent events where the conversion ratio is actually changing based on future events, we actually have to see whether these are independent or interdependent. All right, we have to evaluate whether the conditions are interdependent or independent. Now, if you think of it, if somebody invests at a valuation of 150 million, it obviously means that they're actually breaching the 100 million value. All right, if somebody is investing at, let us say, a valuation of 170 million, it means that condition 2 is satisfied, and also by default, condition 1 is also satisfied. Because for somebody to invest at a value equal to 150 million, it obviously means that the valuation of 100 million is actually crossed. All right, so for to achieve condition 2, it by default means that condition 1 will also be have to achieved. All right, to achieve condition 2, condition 1 also should be achieved, right? Similarly, to if somebody is investing at a valuation of 200 million, it obviously means that condition 1 and condition 2 have been actually satisfied, because for someone to invest at 200 million, it obviously means that they've crossed the 100 million and 150 million valuation. All right, so over here, conditions 1, 2, and 3 are actually dependent on each other. All right, for condition 3 to actually be fulfilled, it means that by default, condition 1 and 2 have to be satisfied. You cannot directly satisfy condition 3 without satisfying condition 1 and 2. You cannot achieve condition 3 without achieving condition 1 and 2. The moment an investor is investing at a valuation of 200 million, it means that obviously condition 1 and condition 2 are also satisfied. Obviously, when somebody is investing at a valuation of 200 million, it means that condition 1 and 2 are also satisfied, where we are saying that an investor should invest at a valuation of 100 million and 150 million. So this is a case where the scenarios or the conditions are actually interdependent. They are dependent on each other. The word dependent is the same as interdependent. There is interdependency between conditions 1, 2, and 3. To achieve condition 2, you have to by default achieve condition 1. To achieve condition 3, you have to by default achieve condition 1 and 2. All right, so they're called as independent or interdependent. Unlike the previous example where to achieve condition 2, we did not have to achieve condition 1. Whereas over here, to achieve condition 2, by default, it means that you would have achieved condition 1. All right, so this is a case where they are they're not independent, but they're interdependent. All right, the scenarios or the events or conditions are interdependent. Now, what the guidance states is, in case of interdependent events, all right, in case of interdependent events, do not actually look at it as four different subcontracts. All right, unlike illustration 22, where we broke it down into four subcontracts and then evaluated in each of the subcontract, over here, what it states is because the conditions are interdependent, do not break it down into four different contracts. All right, do not break it down into four different contracts. Consider this entire preference share as a single contract. Consider this entire convertible preference share as a single contract and see whether it satisfies the obligation to issue a fixed number of equity shares. All right, so we're actually not going to break this down into four subcontracts. We're going to look at it as a single contract and we will evaluate whether the obligation to issue fixed number of equity shares is actually satisfied. Now, over here, the obligation to issue fixed number of equity shares is not satisfied because there is a possibility that you might actually issue one equity share or 1.5 shares or two shares or three shares. All right, so there's an obligation to issue a variable number of equity shares. It can either be one equity share or 1.5 or two or three, and therefore it is not an obligation to issue a fixed number of equity shares. It's an obligation to issue a variable number of equity shares, and hence this will be classified as a financial liability. All right, so this won't be classified as equity, it will be classified as a financial liability. All right, assuming you have 10,000 preference shares, the entity RDT Limited may either be required to issue 10,000 equity shares or 15,000 equity shares or 20,000 equity shares or 30,000 equity shares. All right, it has an obligation. We're not going to break this down into four subcontracts to evaluate whether the entity has an obligation to issue a fixed number of equity shares or not. All right, so because the entity has an obligation to issue variable number of shares, we will classify it as a financial liability. Let's now look at the solution. The four events are interdependent because the second event cannot be met without also meeting the first event, and third event also cannot be met unless the first two are actually met. Therefore, this contract should be treated as a single instrument. We are not going to break this down into four subcontracts. We're going to consider this as a single contract. We're going to consider this as a single instrument when applying the fixed for fixed test. The test is then failed because the number of shares to be exchanged for the cash are variable. All right, the number of shares that we are going to issue are actually variable in nature, and hence it fails the test, and therefore it will be classified as a financial liability. All right. So where the conversion ratio is contingent upon future events, evaluate whether the future events are independent or interdependent. Independent means to achieve condition 2, you do not have to achieve condition 1. Interdependent means to achieve condition 2, you have to necessarily achieve condition 1. All right. So in such a case, if it is independent, you will actually evaluate each of the subcontracts separately and you will see whether the obligation to issue a fixed number of equity shares is satisfied for each of the subcontracts. If it is satisfied for each of the subcontracts, then as a whole, the convertible preference shares will be classified as equity instrument. Under interdependent scenarios, which is illustration number 23, where condition 2 achievement necessarily means that you also have to achieve condition 1, it basically means that you will actually look at it as a single contract. You will not break it down into four subcontracts, and you will actually look at it as a single contract to evaluate whether entity Atal Limited has an obligation to issue a variable number or a fixed number of equity shares. All right, in this case, it had an obligation to issue a variable number of equity shares, and therefore it will be classified as a financial liability. Another example can also be, let us say, I'm just extending illustration 23. Let us say I actually tell you that the conversion ratio will actually be 1 is to 1 if the profit in year 1 X is greater than or equal to 10 crores. All right. The conversion ratio will be 2 is to 1 if the profit in year 1 is greater than equal to 20 crores, and the conversion ratio will be 3 is to 1 if the profit is actually equal is great in year 1 is greater than or equal to rupees 40 crores. All right, and it will be 4 is to 1 if none of the events actually are satisfied. What do I mean if none of the events are satisfied? Let us say if the profit is, let's say, less than 10 crores. If it's less than 10 crores, or if let's say I'm making a loss, if I'm making a loss, all right, then the conversion ratio will be 4 is to 1. Now, if you think of it again over here, these are actually interdependent. All right, they're interdependent because to actually achieve a profit of 20 crores, I necessarily have to cross the profit of 10 crores. I cannot directly achieve a profit of 20 crores without achieving the profit of 10 crores. All right, so to achieve condition 2, I necessarily have to cross the condition 1. All right, only when I breach 10 crores profit, I can reach a profit of 20 crores. Same way, to achieve a profit of 40 crores or more, I necessarily have to breach condition 1 and 2. I cannot achieve condition 3 without achieving condition 1 and 2. So this is also a case of interdependent. All right, this is also a case of interdependent, and therefore we are going to look at it as a single contract. We will be looking at it as a single contract and not as four subcontracts. And obviously over here the conversion ratio is changing, so we don't have an obligation to issue a fixed number of equity shares. We have an obligation to issue a variable number of equity shares, and therefore this will be classified as a financial liability and not as equity. All right, this was another example of interdependent scenarios. All right, this was just an extension of illustration number 23, or another way of looking at illustration, another instance of interdependent scenarios. All right, thank you.